Hello viewers, and welcome to yet another Warhammer 40,000 Conquest commentated Octagon match. Today I'm going to be showing you a game between Diskor, playing as the Swarmlord, allied with the Synapse unit, the seldom played Venomthrope Polluter, running up against Veniel, who happens to be playing the Orks Warlord Nazdreg. This is going to be a very curious match. It's a warlord that we certainly see fairly often for the Tyranids, but the Orks definitely don't make much of a showing here. Neither player has opted to take a mulligan, and at the present moment, in assessing their opening hands, we end up seeing the initiative token possessing Ork player put out a copy of Ammo Depot into his HQ, countered by a digestion pool for our Tyranid player, so infested planets are going to allow him to put units into play for very, very cheap indeed. And of course, we happen to see two Scything Hormagaunts that automatically infest whatever planet they happen to be deployed to, and we also have a Toxic Venomthrope, which infests planets during the command phase, and all of this is going to be absolutely crucial because it just so happens that Diskor is holding on to a Shrieking Harpy, and as soon as that's fighting at an infested planet, its declaration of attack exhausts any non-elite army unit and token unit present at that planet. Planet number 1, we see our Ork player put out a very powerful Snakebite Thug, a 3/4 that deals damage to itself upon attacking, and we see the first of our Scything Hormagaunts touch down at planet number 2. So planet number 2 is going to be automatically infested. In assessing our Ork player's hand, he's still got quite a bit of economy cards out there. We see one of his two rogue traders land on planet number 3, which is going to allow him to win command there. He's still got a promotion. He's got a Squigify to get rid of a powerful non-vehicle army unit, which is going to be just absolutely fantastic and eventually likely helping him to counter that Shrieking Harpy. And then he's got his signature attachment, the Cyborg Body, which doubles an attached army unit's HP, or serves as 3 shields. We end up seeing the Toxic Venomthrope played out to planet number 3, and we also see that copy of Promotion allowing our Ork initiative token possessing player to ultimately best the command of that player. So Diskor currently has 1 resource and 3 cards relative to Veniel's 3 resources and 3 cards, and just as a reminder, Diskor is our Swarmlord player, Veniel happens to be our Ork player. What's very curious about this match is we end up seeing our Venomthrope Polluter. Well, we actually see Veniel draw a card thanks to Ammo Depot, which ended up being a No Mercy. So his only unique is going to be Nazdreg at the present moment, but perhaps he ends up having the Def Kopta piloting boss Zugnog in his deck. Perhaps he has Crush Face. We also end up seeing a Rogue Trader played out to planet number 5, and I believe that is indeed our Ork player's last action. The Synapse unit for our Tyranid this game is the, like I mentioned, very seldom played Venomthrope Polluter. It's after this unit commits to a planet, you can move a non-warlord unit from the planet with your warlord to its planet. So he could relocate the Scything Hormagaunts or the Toxic Venomthrope to wherever he ends up putting down his Venomthrope Polluter. The Swarmlord definitely doesn't want to go to planet number 1. That Snakebite Thug is sure to deal out quite a bit of damage to it, so it typically does best when put out to planet 2 or planet number 4 or 3, anywhere but 1 and 5. Both of our players have currently picked their warlords, and I've not assessed our planet layout yet, but we see Nazdreg go to 4, which is Farron, which will allow him to rout target non-warlord units. Unsurprisingly, we see the Swarmlord touch down at planet number 2, which is going to be Karnath, allowing him to trigger the battle ability of any unit in play, and the Venomthrope Polluter we see go to planet number 5, and it reels the Scything Hormagaunt away from planet number 2 to planet number 5, so that's going to give him a total of 2 command icons, which surpasses, not just matches, but actually beats the command icon value of that Rogue Trader, so he's shutting down his opponent's economy ever so slightly. We see our Swarmlord, of course, generate a Termagant token at either adjacent planet, and even though our Orc player has the initiative token, if that Snakebite Thug attacks and destroys this Termagant token, it's going to deal 1 damage to itself in response. So that Termagant token is all but certain to be destroyed. In regard to command income, we saw 3 cards and 3 resources for our Orc player, 1 card, 3 resources for our Tyranid. So our Tyranid ended up drawing an Indescribable Horror, which essentially routes any unit you'd like that happens to be an army unit, so long as you have a number of Tyranids equal to its cost or greater. And for our Orc, we got a signature Nazdreg's Flash Gets, a Bad Dock, very curious inclusion indeed, as well as a Goth Boys. Barlas ends up captured by Nazdreg, and that's going to be a random card discarded from our Tyranid player's hand. And he ends up discarding a copy of Regeneration, which is a very nasty loss to see indeed. The Orcs, kind of their hallmark, is very high stats, very high offensive ability, so that's going to be really difficult in trying to overcome some of Nazdreg's brutal conferring keyword and just powerful Orc statistics. We also see Karnath triggered, and that's going to key off of Ossus 4. So we're going to see 1 resource token stolen by Diskor from Veniel. So it looks like he's robbing his friend of 1 resource. We've still got Karnath as our soon-to-be planet number 1. Iridial is going to be planet number 2. Farron is going to be planet number 3. And then, of course, Ossus 4 is going to be planet number 5. We see Nazdreg win a battle at Farron, and he uses his effect to basically rout the Scything Hormagaunts. And of course, as the combat phase comes to a close, all of our warlords and our Synapse unit bounce back to the headquarters. So our players are starting to see quite a few different resources here. It seems as though Octagon's functionality is once again ever so slightly broken, in that I'm the only player that ends up gaining any resources and cards, so I'm going to have to go ahead and remind our players to do this manually. Well, with but a simple reminder out of the way now that our players have manually amassed their resources and cards, we see a grand total of 9 resources for our Tyranid, 8 resources for our Orc, soon to be 5 cards for our Tyranid, and 8 cards for our Orc player. Our Tyranid player happened to stumble across a copy of the Termagant token generating Termagant Horde, as well as the command icon conferring Hive Mind specialization unit, the Brood Warriors, one of the Swarmlord signatures. And then in taking a peek at the Orc player's hand, he ended up getting a Battle Cry, which is going to be fantastic to allow him to absolutely pummel some of the hard-hitting Tyranid units, of which we've actually yet to see any, so probably not the best card to draw against the Swarmlord, since Termagant tokens only have a single hit point, but a copy of Promotion is seldom unwelcome. Our initiative token, of course, passes to our Tyranid player, and now it's all up to Diskor. What exactly are we going to see? We could see a Shrieking Harpy put out to planet number 1. He's got the initiative token. He could essentially guarantee winning that planet, and then, of course, in assessing victory conditions, our Orc player happens to have 1 green strong point icon, and that means that if he takes planet number 2, if he takes planet number 4, he could win the game. Or if any of our players, either of our players, manages to just sweep victory the next 3 planets, then they could very well just win the game through that means. So therefore it's entirely possible that we could see the Shrieking Harpy touch down on Karnath, the Swarmlord could benefit from the ability there, and then the Venom Throat Polluter could each and every additional turn simply relocate the Shrieking Harpy to where it's going to be most useful. Iridial could be fantastic in wiping all the damage off the Shrieking Harpy, but our Tyranid player is now going to struggle with trying to maintain these infestation tokens. He does happen to have a copy of the Scything Hormagaunt, which is going to set him up nicely to infest, say, Iridial, but unless he gets a copy of Predation or something like that, Farron might be a little bit of a problem for him. We do end up seeing his deploy action being playing the Shrieking Harpy out to planet number 1. He does have the initiative token. He does happen to have an infestation token at that planet, and having that copy of Digestion Pool in play means that he's able to put out that Harpy for only 4 resources. So definitely a pretty fantastic savings. He might want to be holding on to that copy of Scything Hormagaunts just because any battle won by a non-Tyranid player at a planet will clear an infestation, so he's definitely going to want to hold onto that infestation token until it's going to be doing him the most good, doing the most work for him. It's now our Orc player's deploy action. Our Orc happens to have 8 total resources. He certainly has Squigify, which could be fantastic in throwing a wrench in our Tyranid player's hands. He's got Cyborg Body, which could do a hell of a lot of good to amplify this Snakebite Thug up to 8 hit points. He's got No Mercy, a Nazdreg's Flash Gits to get multiple attacks to kill off multiple Termagant tokens. Bad Doc would be pretty reasonable because, once again, in just dealing with Termagants, it's likely to incur a small amount of damage as opposed to being outright destroyed. And then alongside Nazdreg, it's got a 4 hit point reservoir, which is great. And then, of course, Goth Boys is always good at the first planet, though the Shrieking Harpy is a tremendous deterrent. And then Battle Cry could just be a fantastic means of overcoming the Shrieking Harpy's printed flying keyword. So a lot of different options here for our Orc player. He's certainly nowhere near being able to trigger this ammo depot to draw a card. Many cards in hand, but let us see what exactly our Orc player opts to do. And we do end up seeing a copy of the Nazdreg's Flash Gits. This is kind of an interesting choice. He's putting this out to the very first planet. I suppose he could Squigify the Shrieking Harpy so that during combat, the text box of the Harpy is essentially blank. Its attack value is set to 1, and even if it did happen to be exhausted, Nazdreg's Flash Gits could deal itself damage in order to ready itself. So we'll have to see if this Shrieking Harpy just gets outright obliterated by Squigify. Certainly a significant resource expense investing 3 resources in an event like this, but definitely not bad by any means. And I can't imagine that our Tyranid player is going to be using an indescribable horror. He certainly could, but Nazdreg's Flash Gits cost 3, and while I certainly would not be surprised to see a Termagant token touch down on planet number 1, I'm not predicting we'll ultimately see 3 Tyranids. In regarding just where our Warlords are going to go, our new planet number 5 happens to be Planum. I could see the Swarmlord going to planet number 2 or planet number 3. We actually end up seeing a Termagant Horde put out at planet number 1, which is interesting because all of a sudden indescribable horror is definitely likely to be an option for our Tyranid player in getting those Flash Gits away from the planet. We also happen to see a Goth Boys touchdown at that planet, and that has to definitely be a sign that something is unusual, just because since our Tyranid has the initiative token, if Shrieking Harpy is functioning to the utmost of its ability, that would be essentially just throwing away a card and a resource by putting out a unit that's just going to keep exhausting and then keep being destroyed. And since both of these players are friends, I think it's entirely likely that they might be relatively familiar with one another's decks. It seems as though a Scything Hormagaunts is played out to planet number 3, Farron, which allows the routing of non-Warlord units. That's kind of an interesting choice because that's, like I mentioned before, one of scarcely few resource tokens, and that brings our Tyranid player down to 0 resources. So at this point, he's essentially going to be forced to pass. We end up seeing a Cyborg Body played out to the Nazdreg's Flash Gits. So it attacks for 2, it has 8 HP, and limit once per phase, it can deal itself a point of damage in order to ready it. And of course, since that's a cost, it can't be shielded, but that's an incredibly nasty attacking unit. And our Orc player still happens to have a grand total of 3 resources. Diskor, our Tyranid, the Swarmlord, ends up indicating he is passed, and of course we see a promotion kind of curiously played out onto this copy of Rogue Trader. So I guess Veniel probably wants to avoid what happened previously, which was having the Venom Throat Polluter move to that planet and then pull over a command icon heavy unit. So even if we see something like this Toxic Venom Throat moved, it's not going to allow him to trump command there. And that Rogue Trader and Ossus 4 are almost guaranteed at this point to accrue a grand total of 3 resources if they're not simply matched. But it looks like Veniel, our Nazdreg player, has decided where he'd like to send his Warlord. I could easily see planet number 1, but I could also just as easily see anywhere elsewhere just to try to snipe command, like planet number 3 to kill off this Scything Hormigaunt to rout a unit to potentially just get rid of that, command victory. I could also see him trying to kill this Toxic Venom Thrope, but the one nice thing for the Tyranid player is depending on where exactly Nazdreg goes, he'll be able to choose what he wants to pull to the planet of Venom Throat Polluter. So whether or not you think it's the best Synapse unit, it's definitely a nice option for just sparing units from being destroyed. We're going to end up seeing both Warlords actually commit to planet number 1. That's a very interesting choice there. And the Venom Throat Polluter ends up going to planet number 5. So the Swarmlord only ends up being able to generate a single Termagant token to planet number 2, and that means he's not going to actually be able to win command there. But definitely it's going to be a very interesting little combat here, and consider that the initiative token is indeed in our Tyranid player's hand. In assessing command struggles, it looks like our Orc is going to end up earning 1 card and 4 resources in total, whereas for our Tyranid, it seems like planet number 1 is going to end up going to him, as is planet number 5. And we actually see the ability of the Venom Throat Polluter pull the Scything Hormigaunts over to planet number 5. So that's kind of a curious choice there, and that is curious all the more so because I can't imagine our Tyranid player is predicting the presence of that Squigify. We'll have to see if that indescribable horror almost certainly ends up getting played, but because of winning a command on 3 different planets, our Tyranid is going to earn a total of 2 cards and 4 resources. He ends up seeing a copy of Hunter Gargoyles, he ends up getting a Scything Hormigaunts, and I'm sure much to our Tyranid player's horror, we do see that copy of Squigify played out on the Shrieking Harpy, so the 2/5 flying with a combat reaction is all of a sudden basically just attacking for 1, it doesn't have flying anymore, it gains the Squig trait, and it's not exhausting army units, so it's doing next to nothing. The Termagant Horde is going to manage to generate a Termagant token, and now let's see, is our Tyranid going to be using Indescribable Horror to get rid of these flash gets? It's incredibly nasty. Nazdreg is sitting here at the planet, and he's giving Brutal to this 8 hit point unit. So that is incredibly dangerous, especially when you stop to consider it's going to be attacking twice per round as soon as it triggers that combat action. So just incredibly nasty stuff. It looks as though that Snakebite Thug is currently sitting in the HQ. I wanted to make sure that that's actually appropriately brought to the planet, so it's kind of a daunting Orc force that's accrued on this planet here, so a lot of different nasty stuff. A Snakebite Thug is going to be attacking for 4 because of its single point of damage, along with Nazdreg's Granted Brutal keyword. The Goth Boys is attacking for 3. That Shrieking Harpy definitely isn't doing much with an attack value of 1, and Nazdreg's Flash Gets is just absolutely terrifying. The Swarmlord is only attacking for 2. This Termagant Horde is going to repeatedly generate additional Termagant tokens, but there's not a lot that we're seeing in our Tyranid player's hand in regard to being able to eke out or command some sort of crushing victory. Indescribable Horror can stave off this Nazdreg's Flash Gets, but it isn't necessarily doing a tremendous amount by itself, and as soon as the Flash Gets start to take quite a bit of damage, hell, for all I know, Nazdreg could end up using this copy of No Mercy in order to essentially guarantee the Swarmlord being bloodied. So it's going to be up to our Tyranid player. Combat has begun. It seems as though the Swarmlord has exhausted, and he uses his first combat action to retreat. So very interesting choice. We've got one Termagant token, we've got the Squigified Shrieking Harpy, and we've got a Termagant Horde. So it's now our Orc player's opportunity to attack. We see the relatively fragile Goth boys take a swing. Our Tyranid player definitely doesn't have much in the form of shield icons, so it's going to be 3 damage dealt out to that Shrieking Harpy. Granted, it only costs 4 resources, but in only being able to attack for 1, that's going to be a very devastating blow. And even though this Squigify only persists until the end of the phase, if he can manage to kill the Shrieking Harpy before it has the opportunity to retreat, then that is absolutely fantastic. This relatively soft-hitting Termagant Horde takes a swing, deals out 1 point of damage to the Goth boys, and we end up seeing Nazdreg's Flash Gits attack. So they take a swing at the Squigified Shrieking Harpy. They're going to be attacking for 2. The only shield icon our Tyranid player happens to have is that Indescribable Horror, and he chooses not to use it as shields. He decides not to play it, so the Shrieking Harpy, probably one of 3 in the Tyranid player's deck, ends up being killed. And of course, this reminder copy of Squigify should be in our Orc player's discard pile. But now it's once again our Tyranid player's turn to attack. All that we see left is this Termagant token. It takes a swing at the Goth boys, and certainly our Orc player does have access to shields, but their battle cry, their no mercy, and quite wisely, I think he just allows the copy of Goth boys to be destroyed and subsequently discarded. So Nazdreg's Flash Gits, if he wants, he could use the opportunity to ready it to get off an attack prior to the Tyranid player having an opportunity to attack. It seems as though Nazdreg has yet to swing. We end up seeing Nazdreg's Flash Gits indeed ready itself, so it's going to be attacking for 3 against that Termagant Horde. Are we going to see that shielded, or is it just going to be outright destroyed? Certainly, if it isn't destroyed, Nazdreg can finish the job, but what is our Tyranid player going to opt to do? Definitely seems like for just a fantastic start, our Tyranid player is all of a sudden finding himself very much between a rock and a hard place. And the Termagant Horde is destroyed. So that is 7 resources down for our Tyranid player. Nazdreg takes a swing and, of course, destroys that last little Termagant token, which I suppose it must have been exhausted, and that's just very, very nasty. That's going to allow our Orc player to win at Karnath. If he wants, he could remove all damage from a target unit, he could rout a target non-warlord, he could steal a resource, or he could move a non-warlord to any planet of his choice. So I'm curious to see whether or not this copy of Nazdreg's Flash Gits is going to be moved to our new planet number 2, or where it's going to be. I suppose he does end up targeting Planum, and what is he going to move where? He ends up bringing his copy of Snakebite Thug to Iridial. Very decent choice, definitely. As soon as he's able to win, he could clear damage off the Snakebite Thug. It's just, a monumentally hard-hitting attacker, and just because it would have been arriving exhausted, the Nazdreg's Flash Gits is much less likely to be destroyed. So we'll have to see what's next to come for both of our players here. But as we move into our headquarters phase, each player ends up drawing, of course, 2 cards and 4 resources. I'm just really curious to see if the Swarmlord can try to dig himself out of this one. The initiative token ends up being passed to our Orc player, and it seems as though our players are starting to do everything manually. Of course, some of the Octagon automated functionality is a little bit messed up at this point. We've got our cyborg body here needlessly exhausted, but both players end up reeling in 2 cards, 4 resources. For the Tyranid player, we see a second copy of Hunter Gargoyles, which is typically useful if you're able to infest more than just this one planet. We've got Farron infested, nothing else. We've got Virulent Spore Sacs, which is normally nice to see, but it poses a little bit of a problem because even though it's infesting a planet, apart from those Hunter Gargoyles, there's no Shrieking Harpy to, tap out the entire Orc armed forces. And dealing out 1 point of damage isn't nearly so good when Nazdreg ends up granting Brutal to all of the units present at his planet, and then in assessing our Orc player's hand, he's got a Shoot a Mob, which is, 1 resource for 1 command icon. It deals out a couple points of damage if he can avoid it being outright destroyed by that Virulent Spore Sacs. We end up seeing another copy of Snakebite Thug touch down on planet number 3, and of course the initiative token is in the hands of our Orc player. He also happened to draw the new unique from the Great Devourer boss Zugnog, and this is going to simply allow him to move Orc army units from whatever planet the unique is at to the first planet. So if he keeps bullying that first planet with Nazdreg, the first planet is Iridial, so he can have a bunch of units take damage, benefit from that Brutal keyword, and then if a unit gets too damaged, he can essentially reset that damage total back down to 0. We see a copy of the Hunter Gargoyles put out to planet number 5, which, remember, during the combat round can either swoop in to Farron, or if our Tyranid puts out a copy of Virulent Spore Sacs to planet number 1, blows that up, and infests the planet, then 1 or more copies of Hunter Gargoyles can move in once all the Orc units have finished attacking, and even though they're just 2 1s, we see another copy of Hunter Gargoyles also played out to planet number 5. They're going to be able to do very well in regard to getting off some attacks once the Orc player can no longer respond, although of course Nazdreg's Flash Gits could use its action after a Gargoyle attacks to attack in return. But we see our Orc put out a copy of Shoot a Mob to planet number 5, and of course Snakebite Thug touches down on planet number 3, so a lot of nasty stuff here. Diskor, our Swarmlord player, has 6 resources, 4 cards. Our Orc player, Veniel, has 1 resource and 3 cards, and at the present moment, I believe they're slowly but surely running out of actions. Our Orc player now has a fantastic opportunity with which to trigger his copy of Ammo Depot. Our Tyranid has yet to take advantage this turn of Digestion Pool, and I'm very curious to see what's next to happen. Planet number 5 here is Yavvarn, which puts units into play. And we end up seeing this Virulent Spore Sacs put into play at planet number 3 after boss Zugnog is put out into play at planet number 3, and we do finally see that Ammo Depot used in order to draw a copy of the Evil Sun's Warbiker. So if boss Zugnog wants, at any point during combat, he could deal 1 damage to himself, he could deal 1 damage to the Snakebite Thug to move them to the first planet, potentially in response to what exactly the Tyranid player opts to put to planet number 1. So if Nazdreg and his Flash Gits aren't powerful enough alongside the Snakebite Thug, Zugnog can essentially change at any time, so potentially keep winning command at Ossus 4 and then relocate to Iridial, or the following turn relocate to Farron as need be. So some pretty spectacular play, I think, on part of our Orc player, and at this point Nazdreg has indicated he has indeed passed. Our Tyranid put his 3rd and final copy of the Scything Hormagaunts out to planet number 1, so that's going to allow these Hunter Gargoyles to swoop in, but it's going to be kind of remaining to be seen during command where exactly all of these Warlords and Synapse units choose to go. We see our Tyranid player's final action being putting out the Brood Warriors to planet number 1, and I believe he should have triggered his Digestion Pool in order to ensure that cost him no resources whatsoever. So just a little bit of a momentary reminder there, but that Digestion Pool should drop the resource cost of the Brood Warriors down to 0, since they happen to be played to an infested planet. But So, little bit of a thanks in our chat log, and of course, now we get to take a look at where exactly our players are going to end up deployed. It looks as though our Swarmlord and his Synapse unit have already decided. I'm going to predict that we end up seeing Nazdreg head out to planet number 1 just to try to pummel our Tyranid player into oblivion, and because if he can win Iridial and he can also win Farron, then he'll essentially manage to win the game. We see the Swarmlord go to planet number 2, so this is going to allow him to rout a non-warlord unit, and the Synapse unit is going to go to planet number 5, so I'm curious as to whether or not he'll end up reeling away any other Tyranid units. This Brood Warriors means there's going to be a ton of command icons at the first planet, but seeing as how Nazdreg went to the first planet, all the command icons in the world are not going to end up winning command for that Tyranid player. We end up seeing our Ork win command on 2 different planets, but he also happens to have 2 copies of Rogue Trader in play, so Orks normally hurt for resources, so he's been able to do a fantastic job of reeling in quite a few, and our Tyranid is unfortunately only going to be able to win command on 2 planets of his own, but he's not going to be able to benefit from an additional card or resource from the Toxic Venomthrope. He's not able to actually win command on planet number 5, so it's going to be 1 card for each player, 4 resources for our Ork, and 3 resources for our Tyranid. So going into combat, our only Tyranid relevant event is this Indescribable Horror, so he can essentially pick and choose whatever Ork unit he'd like to banish, but this Snakebite Thug and Boss Zugnog could move in at any time, and of course, the initiative token is in the hands of the Ork player. He takes a swing at the Brood Warriors. He's going to be attacking for a grand total of 5 because of the presence of Nazdreg, or I suppose he's actually attacking for 4. The damage does not actually occur until the attack is fully resolved. But that Brood Warriors is destroyed. Certainly not a lot of shielding going on for our Tyranid player. And once again, just in regard to Ork events, we've got that Battle Cry, we've got No Mercy. It looks as though he ended up drawing another copy of Ammo Depot, so a lot of punishment coming out done by the Ork. A Scything Hormigaunt controlled by our Tyranid takes a swing at the Snakebite Thug. It's threatening for 2. A Battle Cry would spare the Snakebite Thug from destruction, but our Ork player allows that kill to go through, so that's essentially going to work just fine. Nazdreg exhausts to take a swing, which is a little bit curious, but he blows up a Termagant token, and of course now the only remaining Ork player-controlled attacking unit is going to be the 0-attack Rogue Trader, which we see this Termagant token take a swing at to destroy, and since it has an attached copy of Promotion, that's a little bit of a bad loss, but considering our Ork player is probably going to be pushing the first planet during the next turn, it's probably not ultimately going to make much of a difference for him. So do we see any action by our Ork player? We end up seeing the Nazdreg's Flash Gits deal a point of damage to it to ready it, and now it's going to be a swing of 4 against the Toxic Venomthrope. So the Venomthrope is all but certain to be destroyed. I wonder when we're going to actually see this copy of Indescribable Horror used, perhaps during the next turn's battle, which is going to be quite likely the decisive combat of the game, and the very final Termagant token, I believe, exhausts, and it's attacking the Nazdreg's Flash Gits. That's going to bring it up to 3 points of damage. It's still got 5 hit points remaining, and it's now attacking for a grand total of 5. The combat round is going to come to an end. I suppose our Ork players chosen not to relocate via Snakebite Thug or Boss Zugnog, and the Swarmlord being able to rout a unit. It's going to be a fantastic opportunity for him to get Boss Zugnog into the Ork player's HQ to prevent some sort of nasty mid-combat swoop-in shenanigans. Kind of curious, we did not actually see these Hunter Gargoyles move in for the kill, so I can only imagine that our Tyranid player must be saving those for the final decisive all comes down to this style battle of the game. But are we going to see a retreat? It looks as though Diskor says, no fear. Veniel responds with no brain, and looks like two friends busting each other's chops a little bit. But Nazdreg's Flash Gits blows up the Scything Hormigons. No retreats whatsoever. Kind of curious, but the Termagant token ends up wounding Nazdreg's Flash Gits to 4, and of course, as soon as our Orc player ends up winning this battle, he's going to be able to trigger Iridial to remove all the damage from this copy of Nazdreg's Flash Gits, so I can only imagine it would have made much more sense for our Tyranid player to ultimately retreat with his forces once he kind of realized that combat was lost, but we now see the Hunter Gargoyles move in using that combat action in order to deal out a couple points of damage to Nazdreg's Flash Gits. So in a world where shield icons did not exist, this would be a great opportunity for him to actually successfully manage to kill Nazdreg's Flash Gits, but unfortunately that's not actually going to be happening here. It seems as though Nazdreg's Flash Gits does finally take the appropriate amount of damage, and we've got two different shield cards in our Orc player's hand, so I can only imagine we won't see an action played out by our Orc player. He does indeed pass on actions. The other copy of Hunter Gargoyles moves in. It swings for 2, but of course our Orc player happens to have two different shield cards here. We see Nazdreg's Flash Gits ready. I can only imagine that must have been a mispress. Alright, so looks like there was a little bit of confusion there regarding Nazdreg's Flash Gits. It had already been activated one time earlier during this round, so we saw our Tyranid player, of course, use his action to move in the second copy of Hunter Gargoyles, and it's now going to be swinging for 2, but much to the frustration, I'm sure, of our Tyranid player, we end up seeing that copy of Battlecry discarded as shields in order to negate that damage, and now this is going to be a fantastic opportunity, had our Orc player chosen to do so, to move in Boss Zugnog and the Snakebite Thug, which I believe personally I would have likely done, just because I'm sure that Farron would have ended up routing this copy of Boss Zugnog. It seems like it would have been a decent opportunity to get a little bit of damage on the Orcs, and then deal out a significant bit of damage here. The Nazdreg's Flash Gits at the beginning of this next combat round, neither player ends up retreating. It destroys a copy of the Hunter Gargoyles, but now there's a little bit of a difficult kind of choice here. The Hunter Gargoyles can attack, and either they'll outright kill Nazdreg's Flash Gits, or he'll have to get rid of that copy of No Mercy. So I suppose in the interest of keeping the Snakebite Thug and Boss Zugnog undamaged, we do end up seeing that copy of No Mercy discarded as shields, and now Nazdreg is going to be able to finish the job, taking a swing at that unexhausted Termagant, which there's nothing that our Tyranid player can do in regard to shielding. 1 damage is all that it's going to take, so that Termagant token is going to be destroyed, and then unless our Tyranid player ends up retreating with the Hunter Gargoyles, they're just going to be essentially destroyed during combat, so it's probably not going to make much of a difference to retreat with the Hunter Gargoyles, but it's definitely the wise move, I think. Our Orc player's ready, our Tyranid unit readies, and of course, Diskor indicates that he is going to be retreating. So he bounces back to the HQ, Iridial is 1, and now our Orc player is going to be able to pull 7 points of damage off of Nazdreg's Flash Gits, and that just makes it an incredibly dangerous unit. We are going to be seeing a battle take place at Farron, but Iridial is captured by our Orc, so he's going to have 2 red icons, 2 green icons, 2 blue icons, and the game is going to come down to our Orc player winning a single additional planet. He could easily try to push Farron, he could also, I suppose if he chooses, try to win at Ossus 4, but it's all going to be up to him. I think, frankly, I'm a little bit less worried about the Scything Hormigons than I am the Virulent Spore Sacs, but it all kind of remains to be seen. So What exactly are we going to see routed as soon as combat begins at planet number 2? I can only imagine it'll be Boss Zugnog, but Swarmlord can certainly prove me wrong should he choose to do so. We see combat indeed begin at Farron, and what are we going to see routed? It looks as though our Tyranid player actually chooses to use a mid-combat action to destroy his virulent Spore Sacs to deal out 1 damage to all the different units opposing him at planet number 3. There's no shielding ability left by our Orc player. That copy of Rogue Trader is destroyed, and as the Swarmlord, of course, triggers Farron's ability, it's going to, just as I expected, rout Boss Zugnog, and now it makes his combat action entirely worthless. So this Snakebite Thug is likely going to be sitting here stranded at Ossus 4, and now it's all going to come down to, are we going to see our Orc player push Farron and try to win the game? He's got this copy of Evil Sun's Warbiker, he's got a copy of Bad Doc that normally isn't doing much, but like I said, 4 hit points is a hell of a lot when the most dangerous thing he has facing him down is something along the lines of a Scything Hormigon, and we see another copy of Bad Doc, and we see Biga is Beta, which is going to be immensely frustrating because that's going to be a hell of a lot of command icons if he uses Biga is Beta to put one of these Bad Docs into play at planet number 1, and of course, Evil Sun's Warbiker will be at least attacking for 4. So both players end up drawing 2 cards, they generate 4 resources, we end up seeing our Tyranid player draw a Tyranid Warrior and a Termagant Horde. So at the present moment, he's got 8 resources, our Orc player has 8 resources, we see a Hunter Gargoyles played out by our Tyranid, and then an Ammo Depot played by our Orc player. So he's starting to run out of cards, he's still got a hell of a lot of resources, and as soon as he's able to put these out, he can keep on using those ammo depots to not just starve our Tyranid player of deploy actions, but just absolutely overwhelm him in a combat sense. And unless our Tyranid player ends up drawing, say, his other copy of Indescribable Horror, or Dark Cunning, or any number of other powerful effects, I don't think the Swarmlord is going to be able to achieve any kind of critical mass necessary to try and best Nazdreg here. We see Termagant Horde played out to planet number 1, and that's going to be generating additional Termagant tokens 1 per round, but I can't imagine that that's going to last very long, seeing as how our Orcs are just so incredibly, powerful here. Biga is Beta puts out a copy of Bad Doc. It's already taken 1 point of damage, so it has 4 command icons sitting out at planet number 3. It's the only time I've seen Bad Doc played in one of these videos so far, and it's the only time I've seen it used to fantastic effect, in that 4 command icons absolutely destroys its opposing 1 command icon Scything Hormigaunt here. So we see our Tyranid player also put out his Tyranid Warrior to planet number 1, and at this point I'm curious, is our Orc actually going to try to push planet number 1, or is he just going to set himself up at Ossus 4 and then just absolutely crush during the combat of the following round? So is he going to be gutsy, or is he just going to kind of press his luck? Is he going to play it safe, be conservative? We see Ammo Depots start to trigger. A copy of Goth Boys ends up being reeled in. He's still got plenty of resources with which to play cards, and I believe at this point our Tyranid player has indeed passed. So we see that Goth Boys, we've still got a promotion, so he can just absolutely manipulate command to ensure that our Tyranid player doesn't get to draw any cards or generate any resources, and there's just still so much nasty stuff. So is he going to push planet 1, or is he going to be conservative and play it out to commit his Warlord to planet number 2? We end up seeing a copy of Promotion played out to the Shoot-A-Mob at planet number 4, and that's going to allow our Orc player to have a total of 3 command on that single unit, which absolutely annihilates the Hunter Gargoyles, but it also sets him up in a very favorable position in case the Venom Throat Polluter tries to pull something over, and we end up seeing a copy of the Evil Sun's Warbiker put out to planet number 2. So in regard to choosing where exactly they're going to be sending their Warlords, I can only imagine that our Orc player is going to be playing it a little bit safe, safe. He's going to be playing conservatively and dumping all of his forces at planet number 2. Granted, our Tyranid is going to be able to rout whatever unit he'd like, but our Ork is not going to have to face down this relatively formidable Tyranid opposition until it bounces back to our Tyranid player's headquarters and ends up being exhausted. So I think the worst case situation for our Ork player would be a Shrieking Harpy being drawn by our Tyranid, just because that would be enormously frustrating to have that touchdown at the infested Ossus 4 here, although as soon as a battle takes place thanks to Nazdreg, that infestation token will be removed, so I'm still not sure our Tyranid player can really do much of anything to try to win this one. We see the Swarmlord move to planet number 3, which is going to be Planum, and we also see Nazdreg bring all of his units to planet number 3, so kind of a very curious choice done by both players. The Venom Throat Polluter goes out to planet number 1, and I suppose I'm a little bit mystified by the response of both players here, so both of them being very kind of ballsy, very interesting indeed. I suppose if our Ork player wanted, he could have used Boss Zugnog's action mid-combat to shift some of these units to planet number 1, just in case he wanted to try to opportunistically win that planet. But I can only imagine that Boss Zugnog will be routed once again, or the Nazdreg's Flash Gits will end up routed, but we see our Ork generate 1 card and 4 resources, and it looks as though our Tyranid player is only going to be winning a grand total of, I believe, 2 resources, so that's definitely not very nice for him to see. And then that is going to bring us to battle. So at the onset of the combat phase, there's not really any actions to be taking place, but we've got a Termagant token generated at planet number 1, we've got one generated at planet number 2, and, well, I suppose we should have it at planet number 2 and 4, but it seems as though our Swarmlord has forgotten to trigger that reaction. We do end up see Farron handily won by the Swarmlord. Boss Zugnog is once again routed, sent exhausted to our Ork player's HQ, and now it's going to be our Tyranid seeing all of these different units bounce back to his HQ. And I can only imagine that our Ork player is going to be hopefully sending a bunch of units to Ossus number 4 on the following turn in order to try and win this one, but I suppose let's see how the remainder of combat plays out. The initiative token is in the hands of our Tyranid player, so he will have the battle initiative at planet number 3 here. Diskor, our Swarmlord player, ends up winning that single material icon from capturing Farron. Once again, all of our players are having to do this manually due to my presence in the game as player number A conflicting with their being player number A or player number B respectively. And now we're going to see a battle at planet number 3. Is the Swarmlord going to try and fight, or is he going to use his first combat action in order to retreat? Let's see how everything ends up playing out. So battle begins, and the Scything Hormigaunt exhausts to swing at Nazdreg. Iridial is now gone, and as soon as the 7 hit point Nazdreg happens to be bloodied, he's no longer going to be able to actually confer Brutal to any of these very high hit point Ork units present all over the battlefield at the present moment. So we've got our Ork player actually sees our Tyranid use Indescribable Horror to rout that copy of Nazdreg's Flash Gits, so we do finally see that put into play. Nazdreg's Flash Gits hasn't attacked a single time, and it ends up being removed from that planet. Kind of a curious choice. I think personally I'd have maybe tried to wait until Nazdreg's Flash Gits had chosen to ready itself, or perhaps I missed it having been readied, but that's definitely, I think, the ideal time for that to occur. Our Tyranid player now has no cards in hand, so Bad Doc swings for 2, and that's going to kill our Scything Hormagaunts. Absolutely nothing that the Tyranid player can do to try to stop that, and the Swarmlord is going to be attacking. I can only imagine it's going to again hit Nazdreg, and now Nazdreg itself is going to have an opportunity to attack. Will it try to hurt the Swarmlord, or will it try and kill this Hunter Gargoyles? Certainly there's no shielding to be done by the Tyranid, and quite wisely, I think I agree, we see the Hunter Gargoyles destroyed, so the Swarmlord readies, our Orc units are going to ready, and now it's going to be very interesting indeed. Both of these Orcs are going to be able to deal out quite a bit of damage. It'll be 4 per round. The Swarmlord is going to be able to bloody Nazdreg in a mathematical sense. Our Tyranid indicates that he is going to stay. He doesn't know that our Orc player has no shields in hand, so is it going to be worth bloodying the Swarmlord, exchanging a bloodying of Nazdreg for that effect? So it's up to our Orc. Does he stay for a mutual bloodying? No, he actually chooses to retreat, and that's going to allow the Swarmlord to win at this planet and relocate a non-warlord to the planet of his choice. So I can only imagine he's going to want to move one of these units, like the Tyranid Warrior, to planet number 1 just to try to spare himself from being obliterated during the following round's turn. So the Swarmlord is going to bounce back to the HQ, and that's going to bring our players to their headquarters phase. No resources, no cards for our Tyranid player compared to 10 resources and 3 cards and 2 ammo depots for our Orc. So a hell of a lot of nasty stuff for our Orc player. The Orc player is going to gain the initiative token, and now our Tyranid is going to have to pray for a bit of a miracle to try and spare him from this one. We see a copy of the Leviathan Hive ship, which is absolutely worthless. We do see a copy of Spore Burst, which is going to be a unit with printed cost 3 or lower into play at an infested planet. Just in taking a look at our Tyranid player's discard pile, he could pick the Virulent Spore Sacs, the Brood Warriors, or the Toxic Venom Thrope. I can only imagine he'll use that Virulent Spore Sacs in order to get some area effect ability, but we see a copy of Crush Face played out to the first planet, and as if the incredible 11 resources weren't already enough, each and every Orc we see deployed to the first planet is going to have its cost reduced by 1. So these Goth Boys are free. Bad Doc only costs 1. Ammo Depot can draw God only knows what from the Orc player's deck, and we do see that copy of Spore Burst. I can only imagine that we'll see a Virulent Spore Sacs touchdown at Ossus number 4 to deal out area effect 1. But we've got a copy of Cracktooth Hall, which is going to be just incredibly nasty. So I suppose what's incredibly maddening is seeing as how the initiative token is in the hands of our Orc player. As soon as the combat phase starts, we could see Cracktooth Hall used to move a point of damage from an Orc to that Virulent Spore Sacs. But it seems instead, I'm slightly surprised, we see a copy of the Termagant Horde put into play instead. So I suppose I forgot about this one. So that'll be a lot of Termagant tokens entering play, which could just be absolutely fantastic for our Tyranid, and it's definitely going to work out much better for him given the presence of this Cracktooth Hall because of that Virulent Spore Sacs. But we see a Goth Boys played for 0 resources. And what exactly are we going to see from our Tyranid? Of course, we don't see anything else played. Let's hope, for his sake, that he ends up getting another copy of Indescribable Horror. Ammo Depot ends up being exhausted. We see a Teleportapad played, which could pull the Shoot-A-Mob from the final planet, move that opportunistically to the new first planet. We end up seeing a Snakebite Thug played for 1 at the first planet. We end up seeing a Goth Boys played for 0 at the first planet. And we end up seeing a copy of Bad Dog played for 1 at the first planet. So if our Orc player wins a lot of command, which it's likely he's going to win on 2 different planets, God, if he draws shield icons, if he gets nasty events, our Tyranid player is just absolutely doomed. So the very final card for our Orc player, who still has 5 resources, is indeed that Teleportapad touching down in the HQ. And now it's going to be all up to command phase. Let's see, where do we want to send our warlords? I can only imagine that every conceivable unit is going to be piling into planet number 1. I can't imagine our Tyranid player has much of a hope at this point, but it's all going to come down to one enormous, incredible battle here. So our players are choosing where to send their warlords, where to send their synapse units. All of our players have presently chosen. We see Nazdreg is going to go to planet number 1. The Swarmlord goes to planet number 1. The Venom Throat Polluter ends up going to planet number 2. I suppose just try to win a card and win a resource. And let's see what exactly they're going to pull. So our Tyranid player is going to be hoping and praying for his second copy of Indescribable Horror. He's still got 32 cards remaining in deck, and it seems as though Nazdreg has rather handily bested him during command throughout the course of this game. He ends up seeing 23 cards remaining in his deck, so our Orc player ends up getting 3 resources, which does him no good whatsoever because he has no cards in hand. Our Tyranid player ends up drawing 1 card and 1 resource, and Termagant Sentry is not quite so useful as, say, a Bone Sabers or anything with shields or an Indescribable Horror. So it's all going to come down to our final planet. No shields, no events, absolutely nothing. It's just going to be an absolute brawl between all of these different units. Nazdreg is very close to being bloodied. The initiative token is in the hands of our Orc player, so I can only imagine that we'll see Nazdreg attacking fairly early. We end up seeing 2 Termagant tokens generated at the beginning of combat, and it's all going to come down to this. What is our Orc player going to do? What is our Tyranid going to do? Evil Sun's Warbiker, of course, opens up with an attack of 4, and it swings against the Tyranid Warrior, a 2/4 unit, which is going to be killed. So nothing that our Tyranid can do. It's just gone, destroyed, discarded. And now it's our Tyranid player's opportunity to respond in turn. What does he want to destroy? No shields for either player. We've got a lot of 1 attack value units. The Swarmlord is the only unit the Tyranid player happens to possess that's attacking for 2. Both of these copies of Goth Boys are attacking for 3. Crush Face is 2. Snakebite Thug, both of them, well, 1 is 3, 1 is 4. Just incredibly nasty stuff. The Termagant Horde takes a swing at Nazdreg, so that's going to be 1 point of damage. Next up, I'm sure, will be our Swarmlord to finish bloodying Nazdreg. But even with losing Brutal, that's not going to make much of a difference here. The Snakebite Thugs takes a swing for 4 against the Swarmlord, which probably is a little bit of a suboptimal play. It would have been more wise, I think, to get rid of one of these Termagant tokens, but not a big deal. The Swarmlord, I can predict, will be attacking Nazdreg to bloody him and kick him from the planet. Nazdreg exhausts. It seems as though our Orc player has called out action, so he uses Cracktooth Hall to remove a point of damage from Nazdreg and places that atop, it seems as though, the Swarmlord. So the Swarmlord is almost bloodied. But of course, the Swarmlord is now going to get 2 swing. Nazdreg will end up taking a point of, 2 points of damage, and then the Swarmlord is about to be bloodied. But who is the Swarmlord attacking? He's not selected a target. He ends up picking the Goth Boys, kind of an interesting choice, but I suppose a wise one all the same. So the Goth Boys is destroyed, its attack value of 3 is now gone, and it's our Orc player's opportunity. There are 3 ready Termagant tokens. He ends up having Crush Face take a swing at 1. It's going to be outright just obliterated immediately, and now we're starting to run out of Orc units, and each and every time we see a new combat phase occur, these Termagant hordes are going to be generating additional Termagants. So a Termagant puts a point of damage onto Nazdreg as soon as he ends up adding that point of damage there. Bad Doc is going to put out, he's going to destroy that Termagant token. It seems as though Nazdreg did not end up taking that point of damage, so perhaps a little bit suboptimal, I believe. Or no, maybe I just missed a point of damage dealt out to Nazdreg, but Nazdreg is successfully bloodied by this Hunter Gargoyles shifting into the planet. So Nazdreg is removed, all of these Orc units are now going to lose Brutal, and now, if at all possible, our Orc player can simply use his 2 remaining actions to kill off these copies of Termagant hordes. So let's see it, the Goth Boys chooses to attack the Swarmlord. I know it's an enticing target, but I definitely think that's a suboptimal play. So the Swarmlord is going to be bloodied. It's going to be banished from the planet, but that means another copy of Termagant Horde is going to survive, with which to generate an additional Termagant, and that's just going to be another frustrating target for our Orc player to have to deal with. The Snakebite Thug takes a swing at the Termagant Horde and just handily destroys it, and that's going to bring us to the end of the first combat round. All of our units are going to be... Oh, I suppose... Okay, so Nazdreg's Flash Gits ends up readying, and then it attacks to deal 2 points of damage to that Termagant Horde. So it would have been a little bit wiser if the... Flash Gits would have used their action to bloody the Swarmlord, and then the 3 damage attacker would have killed the Termagant Horde, but we see Teleportapad move the Shuta mob to the first planet, then it uses its ability to destroy that Termagant Horde, so now we finally see all of our units ready. I can't imagine either player is going to be exhausting to retreat. And now it's all going to come down to our final combat round here. So what exactly are we going to see? Both copies of Snakebite Thug take a point of damage through resolving their attacks. The initiative token remains in the hands of our Orc player. He takes a swing, attacking for 3 to kill off the Scything Hormagaunts, and now our Tyranid is down to 3 remaining units. So what exactly are they going to do? Once again, no shields. Seems as though at least both of our players are having a very good time, which is definitely what matters. But those Hormagaunts are obliterated. Now, what are the Hunter Gargoyles going to be attacking? Granted, Nazdreg's Flash Gits have used their bonus attack ability for this phase, but they've still got 6 hit points remaining. The Hunter Gargoyles are going to use their opportunity to kill off a copy of Snakebite Thug that already had 2 points of damage, so a very wise move there. Evil Sun's Warbiker is going to be attacking for 4, and it's going to kill off a Termagant. And now the only remaining Termagant attacker is going to be taking its final swing of the game, and it at least gets quite a bit of value from killing off a shoot-em-up with attached promotion. But now it's time for our Orc to run rampant, and it seems as though the green tide is going to absolutely crush the Tyranid swarm. So we see Crush Face quite aptly wreck this remaining Termagant token, and at the present moment we see a GG called out by Diskor. So it seems as though Nazdreg has won. Very well played by both of these players, so thank you so much to both of them. Very well played. Thank you for them letting me record this game. I hope you very much enjoyed this epic, harrowing match between the seldom played Nazdreg and the popular Tyranid Warlord, the Swarmlord. So, incredible play on part of our Orc in particular, just a devastating economic lead, all sorts of different powerful Orcish effects, all coming together to just obliterate our Tyranid. The Hive Mind has suffered a grievous loss this day, and the Tyranids have been purged from the Traxxas sector. So once again, thank you so much for watching, and as always, if you enjoyed this video, be sure to hit that like button and subscribe to my channel if you've not done so already, or if you are already subscribed, you're encouraged to share this content, as the more players there are that end up seeing fantastic games like this one, the more players we might ultimately serve to draw to this game, and of course, serve only to ever expand our growing Conquest community. If at any point you'd like to get in touch with me and have me spectate, record, and commentate some games of your own, do a deck deconstruction, or have any other kind of ideas for videos, be sure to let me know through Twitter or through Facebook. And of course, if at any point you'd like to help me recur some of my file hosting and operating expenses, I'd be honored were you to investigate my Patreon. But once again, thank you so much for watching, and as always, be sure to check back in again soon for ever more Conquest LCG content to come.